Okay. Good morning. Welcome. Jazz icon Ernie Watts, part 1. This is Life's Dream, number 87, with Corky Siegel.
Hey, it's me.
Down both sides of the road, I got 9 hours behind me, I got 9 more to go. I'm half asleep at the wheel. I'm half asleep at the wheel, but I'm only half a day away. Foot down to the floorboards, I'm in a one-car race, while my radio is slapping country tunes across my face. Half asleep at the wheel, I'm half asleep at the wheel, but I'm only half a day away. I got all my windows open, I got my head out in the wind, I got JC on my dashboard just in case I need a friend. I'm half asleep at the wheel, I'm half asleep at the wheel, but I'm only half a day away. This coffee just ain't working, but I'll try another cup. If my baby were with me, she'd know how to keep me up. I'm half asleep at the wheel, asleep at the wheel, but I'm only half a day away. These pretzel sticks at Denny's don't give me much relief. I got one eye on the state patrol, the other eye's asleep. I'm half asleep at the wheel, I'm half asleep at the wheel, but I'm only half a day away. getting heavy. My eyes are killing me. If I don't keep them open, I'll be looking up a tree. I'm half asleep at the wheel. I'm half asleep at the wheel. But I'm only half a day away. I'm only half a day. Story time. But first I'm going to turn off the recorder. Okay. Story time. Where's Holly?
Hello.
She's back there. Though this is called Jazz Icon Ernie Watts, Part 1. Live stream number 87. Ernie Watts is a 2-time Grammy winner. He's recorded and or toured with the Rolling Stones, Aretha Franklin, Cannonball Adderley, the Jacksons, the Commodores. He was soloist on many Marvin Gaye hits, Diana Ross, Steely Dan, Barry White, Frank Zappa, Kurt Elling, Elton John, Oliver Nelson, Pat Metheny, James Brown, Quincy Jones. He was with the Tonight Show Band for 20 years with Johnny Carson and Doc Severinsen. He played with bassist Charlie Hayden's quartet, West, for 25 years. And he did many projects with guitarist Lee Rittenauer. He recorded soundtracks on films, including Grease, The Color Purple. And he told about his very beginnings on Holly and Corky Siegel's live stream number 87. Let's go now to Storyland, where we watch Ernie put his finger in a 3,000 watts, no pun intended, light socket of jazz inspiration and light up the world with the miracle of musical illumination. 'Cause it's story time. Ernie Watts. That's it. Our last 3 gigs before the damn pandemic was with Ernie. March 7th was at St. John's School of the Arts in the Virgin Islands. That was with Chamber Blues. March 9th was a duet in Tortola. And March 13th was in Cocoa Beach, Florida, at Heidi's Jazz Club. March 18th, we said goodbye, and Ernie and Patricia went off to Cambria, California, where they live. We met Ernie in 2009 on tour with Dr. L. Subramaniam in India.
Oh my Lord. Take this tooth right here.
But Ernie met the saxophone at age 13 in the 7th grade. He wasn't interested in playing music. He was doing things in the art department. But a friend coaxed him into the music department where they were lending out instruments. They were out of trombones, thank goodness, says Patricia.
And so I got a baritone saxophone because I was tall for my age. And the teacher figured I could carry it in marching band. And so that's how I started on the saxophone. It was just one of those things that just came out of nowhere, you know?
And then he has the other part of that, which is in about, 3 months or something?
Yeah, 3-4 months.
The school got an alto saxophone at that point, and they gave it to Ernie, and he says that's because the teacher noticed that since he was carrying the baritone back and forth to school every day, one of his arms was now 3 inches longer than the other arm. So he was trying to help him out.
That's how I started on the saxophone. The homes were in rows, so they were like townhouses. We used to call them row houses in those days. Now we call them townhouses. So my neighbor would hear me practicing. And so he sort of took me under his wing. He was a jazz fan. He was a big, big jazz follower. His name was Alden Jenkins, and everybody called him Aldy. He was like my big brother. And he heard me practicing, and he started to lend me jazz records. And the first jazz record he ever loaned me was a Dave Brubeck album called Jazz Goes to College. And that's where Patricia's going now. She's on her way to college. and then when she gets back, hold on a second.
This is the very
This
record.
is Jazz Goes to College.
That's the record that Aldi gave him.
This is my first jazz record that I ever heard that my neighbor gave me.
Still have it. Wow, that's awesome.
I still have it. My mother wrote on this record. She wrote, so I wouldn't lose it. She wrote, Ernest J. Watts Jr. Wow. So she got me this stereo record player, and it was stereo because you put the record player over here, and then you take the speaker off the front of the record player and you put it over there with a wire, and that made a stereo, right? That was a stereo. So the first record she got me from the Columbia Record Club was a Miles Davis record called Kinda Blue. Okay. Now that has turned out to be one of the great jazz classics of all time.
It's the most famous.
Yeah, it's the most famous. It's still selling. it's still a hit.
Yep.
Right. And I tell people, if you don't like jazz and you just think you should have one jazz album in your collection, that's the one. On that album was Miles, of course, Cannonball Adderley, who was one of my favorite alto players, right? Wynton Kelly played piano, and so did Bill Evans. He had 2 piano players on that record. Then he had Jimmy Cobb playing drums, who had just taken that gig after Philly Joe Jones had left Miles. Very, very great player. And an incredible young bass player named Paul Chambers. And Paul Chambers played on everything, everybody's record. So that was the record. The tenor player on that record was John Coltrane. And I heard John Coltrane play, and I tell people it was like sticking my finger in a light socket. You know, it just totally rearranged my chromosomes.
Yep.
You know, it was just this unbelievable thing, because everybody else was great. They were all geniuses. They had a certain way they played. They had a certain vocabulary, their language, the way they played lines, the way they played jazz. And then Coltrane played, and it sounded totally different. But it worked with them, right? It still sounded good. It still worked with them. So to me, to my 14-year-old ears, it sounded like he was playing in another key, but it worked. Right? It sounded like the band was over here and he was over there, but it was just beautiful how it worked. And so from that point on, I took all my allowance money, I took all my lunch money, and I bought a John Coltrane record every week, right? And I would put these Coltrane records on my little record player that had a stacker, right? I put like 2 or 3 records, John Coltrane records, on my stacker every night, and then I turn the volume down super low, and I go to sleep listening to all of these things, like John Coltrane playing impressions, and John Coltrane playing all of these other incredible things. And I would listen for hours, hundreds of hours of Coltrane, hundreds of hours of Cannonball Adderley, Eric Dolphy, Ornette Coleman, all of these people that were amazing people. And that's the way I learned how to improvise. And it was a combination of studying classically, learning technique, learning pitch, learning how to read, studying classical music, playing concertos and sonatas and stuff. I played with the Delaware Symphony in Wilmington when I was about 16 or so, and I played this famous concerto for saxophone called the Concertino da Camera with the orchestra in Wilmington, which was made up of members of the Philadelphia Orchestra. Eugene Ormandy was a conductor at that time. And it was all the people that played in that orchestra.
And he was the featured soloist at age 16.
Right.
At that point, he'd been playing saxophone for 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I practice a lot.
All the time. His sister told me she used to sit on the front porch at their house when he was practicing, and if anybody wanted to come up to the door, she'd say, "Oh, no, you can't go in there right now. My brother's practicing."
And so everybody knew that I was playing and I was practicing and I was studying. So all the schools in the area, all the teachers knew about me. And all the schools knew about me. We didn't have a jazz department, but other schools in the area had jazz departments, and they would invite me to play or I play in their marching bands. I became like
A ringer.
a ringer. I was a ringer. My sister tells this funny story. She says, "Yeah, I used to go when I was little. I used to go and look in your closet, and you had 6 or 7 different schools' band uniforms." You know,
And what's he doing with those?
what's he doing with all those band uniforms? And I do a parade with a Catholic school band. I do a parade with another high school. You know, I was doing all of that when I was a kid because all I really wanted to do was play.
And he also told me he never went to his own prom because he was playing at somebody else's prom.
I was playing at somebody else's prom for my prom. There was Count Basie's band, Duke Ellington's band, Woody Herman's band, Stan Kitten's band, Maynard Ferguson's band, Tommy Dorsey's band. Who was the trumpet player that Doc loved?
Harry James.
Harry James band. All of these bands would come and play in these ballrooms.
Right.
And so my neighbor would take me to hear these bands live. We were standing up in front. Marshall Royal, who was a very, very famous lead alto saxophone player with Count Basie, he didn't feel well. So he got up and left the stage, and Frank West, who was the second alto player, he slid over to play lead. And so when they took a break, I went up and I asked Frank Foster, I said, "Hey, can I sit in? You know, can I play?"
Just out of the sky,
yeah,
right?
I'm 16 years
some
old.
kid he's never seen before.
I'm some idiot kid. I don't know nothing, so I think I know everything. Right? I know absolutely nothing, so I think I know everything. I can play the saxophone, you know, and I was learning how to read and playing and stuff. So they said, "Yeah." Right?
They did.
So they came back up for the second set, and they get Marshall's alto, and they let me play Marshall's alto. I played second alto, and Frank West played lead. And I played a set with Count Basie when I was 16 at this ballroom, you know. And I was with a friend of mine, and it was so long ago, I forgot. It kind of became a dream.
Yeah.
And I forgot. It was so long ago. I
wasn't
said,
sure
you know,
if it was real.
Yeah, did I really play with Count Basie when I was 16? You know, and then I was doing a gig at a club somewhere, and some guy came up to me one night and he said, "Ernie, do you remember when you played with Count Basie?" I was in the audience, and I said, "Oh, I did."
Also.
Anyway, that's the beginning. That's how I started. I went to Berkeley and I learned about the science of music. You know, I learned about the craft and harmony and chord scales and all of those things. So while I was at Berkeley, Buddy Rich came to work in Boston at a place called
Lenny's on the Turnpike.
Yeah, Lenny's on the Turnpike, which was a very famous jazz club at that time.
He was doing a tour.
Yeah, Buddy was doing his first tour. Buddy had been with Harry James for years, and he started his own band. And he went to LA and he made an album called West Side Story. And that was a big hit. It was a big successful thing as an instrumental album. And they were on tour, and they got to Boston, and Gene Quill, who is a very famous, great alto player from New York, he decided to quit and go back to New York from Boston. So Buddy's manager called the Berkeley School. Phil Wilson, who was teaching there. He was a great jazz trombone player, too. He played with Woody Herman's band and all of these other bands, and he was a great writer. So Buddy's manager called Phil to recommend somebody, some kid that could play, who could finish up the gig at Lenny's on the Turnpike, and then they were going to go to New York, and then they would get an adult. They'd get a real saxophone player when they got to New York.
Yep.
So I joined Buddy, and then I was with Buddy for like 2 years, 2.5 years. So I guess they couldn't find a real saxophone player.
So that was Ernie part 1,
That's right. We've got an exciting part 2 coming up.
because he's going to talk about the Rolling Stones, very little about that, and he's going to talk about Cannonball Adderley and Frank Zappa and
Is
many adventures.
so we will see you on the Zoom.
Yep, see on the Zoom, everything's right up there.
Correct. And
Is it right up there? No. That's another. It's not up there. It's in our description, video description, and in the chat. But basically, you go to Corky Music website, corkymusic.com, and go to music, and then that page has everything right there, all your links for Zoom and everything.
so we'll see you on the Zoom.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.